Okay. So basically what I want to do is that because of the sprints, I'm going to start with, let's say, 3.5. I did a small introduction, but we're going to work for 3 weeks on 3 workshops covering, let's say, the basics of working with, let's say, grids and structures, and especially the focus on using style sheets. And what I want to do is that today I'm going to cover and go through the basics of InDesign, because it's actually a very good example of looking at a system that you're already quite familiar with, and then applying that so that next week we're going to continue to do that in Adobe XD. And the week after that we're going to do that same thing in Adobe After Effects. So I want you guys to kind of bear with me that we're going to try to feed you with a lot of content about the use of style sheets and more specific ways of how to organize your work so that you can draft really quickly. And going from, let's say, from print media to user interface and web typography to moving typography. And with that, let's say, skill set in mind, it will be easier to do more practical assignments at the second phase of the semester, following up to the second semester. Yeah? So basically what I did this morning is that I wanted to start and discuss some key aspects of InDesign, and some of them might be a little bit, could be seen as a bit redundant, so that we probably have a bit of an overlap. Now I, of course, lost my flippity flip. Hello, 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 hello. Comme ça. Sorry? No, I think that it's good to just open a blank InDesign file and to just try out to follow me a little bit along what I'm doing. It might be kind of like too much to keep track on all the aspects, but maybe just save it like in between and then you can follow up. And that's why I think it's good if I record this, then you can just look a little bit back like, what was that again? Yeah. So basically, where I want to start is that for all of these procedures, it starts by, let's say, trying to get to a model that I will kind of guide you guys through, is that we as, let's say, graphic designers, we tend to work very intuitively. We open up, we have this empty canvas, default settings, we start picking a typeface, playing around, and then we have ideas, and then there might be a point where we make a couple of nice spreads, and we think, oh, okay, great, we have a design, and then start implementing the content to those drafts, right? I think, is that fair to say that a lot of you guys work in that matter? Yeah. So, which I also did, and this is totally fine, but the problem is that a lot of our key decisions that we make when it comes to, let's say, book design, is that we can't really oversee what the consequences of those decisions are on the whole scope of this project. So if you make a nice spread, you still don't know, because it also comes with experience, like what does that decision mean for the content if your book will have 200 pages? Because just a simple change of that spread could mean that you add 36 pages or 60 pages, or it becomes less. So, and in order to get grip on doing it in such a way that we can do this with very little effort and do very big gestures to see what happens, we need to kind of properly kind of align our doing. And so in this case, I'm going to start with explaining a little bit about master pages. So if we have a default page setup, one of the things that I always notice at first when I open up documents is that usually a lot of people actually dismiss the use of the page margins. So then I open the page margins, I go to layout, margins and columns, and then everything is set still to 12.7. Oh yeah, I just drew some guidelines, something like that. So try to think about, and that's the good thing, you don't need to be final about these things, but think about, where do I want to work in? How much space do I need in the top, in the bottom, in the sides? And given that, we're going to kind of come up with also an idea of the purpose. In this case, we're thinking about a book. Well, 80% of the content of this book will be text, plainly reading text, so that makes up that it will be the body text. The body text is, let's say, the big chunk of your information that you need to find a way to move around. For these pages, normally you would have like a master page here in the top, but you can, of course, already make a kind of an editorial kind of approach of, let's say, what would more or less almost every book need. So if we think of a combination of, let's say, a book where we always also use images, there could be that we have a grid for, let's say, standard text pages. Could be that we have a spread that is more already adjusted for the combination of text and images, or a section that only has images. Could be a spread that says, oh, if there's going to be a sequence of images, I'm already going to make the grid that it fits 2 images or 4 images or 1 big image. And so you already make a palette of typologies of pages. And the same counts for our style sheets and text later on. And the procedure that actually follows up to all of these items is something that is quite often overlooked, but that's where the real power is that if I go to my master options for a specific master page, you see that it has a prefix and it has a name, and then based on master. And in this case, my first one, it is set to none. So what I do, if I want to kind of chain and make sure that this system becomes more easier to manipulate later on, is that every new type of master page I make, so let's say there's one for images, I make a new master page, but in my options it's set to primary pages. So all these pages chain up back to that very first one, which means that it takes all the settings of that first page unless I change something. And that makes up that I can make all kinds of variations, but the stuff that I don't touch will be locked, and will only direct back to that very first page. So in the end, if I want to change something, something crazy like, oh, I'm gonna put this here, and I'm gonna put my page numbers there, then automatically in all the other pages it moves along with it. So all the way in the back, if I at the end of this book decide I'm gonna change this, I don't need to fix like 5 or 6 master pages, or even worse, do it on the level of the page itself, just to be consistent and that you know that you cannot fuck that up. So that is one principle of, let's say, how master pages are a form, let's say, of style sheets. So there is, let's say, consistency of the first margins, and I can make different margins in every master page. Only if I don't change them, they will remain the same as the first one. That's clear, right? Then let's jump into the text. So basically what I often still see is that when it comes down to the baseline grid and paragraph styles, is that in order to determine a baseline grid, we're not going to make a baseline grid based on exceptions. So making a very tiny baseline grid that matches your footnote doesn't make sense. It's the same as making a baseline grid that matches your titles. Also doesn't make sense. So a baseline grid is something that you use for the basis of everything, which is mostly the body text. So let's say if we just take it very generically, most of the typesetting of body texts, depending on the format of the book a bit, will be somewhere around between 8 and 11 points. Most of them will be around 9, 9.5, 10, something like that. Which makes that we also know that normally, thinking about the leading, that the leading is usually always higher than the size of your type size. So if my body text is 9, could be 11, 12, 13, depending on what your kind of aesthetics are or what the typeface demands for. So already know that, oh, basically more or less all the baseline grids are somewhere between 10, 11 and 13 points. Okay? So if I go to my preferences to grids, this means that I can say, in my case, I said, okay, start at 0 millimeter relative to the top of the margin. Could also be the top of the page, but I prefer to use margin. Then use an increment of 12 points. That's it. And that's what I have here. There's different ways of building grids, and I'm just going to show how I like to do them, and there's not set in stone. There's not like, this is the way to do grids. This is how I think can be useful to think of grids. So what I did is that I have a kind of an idea of what kind of margins I would like to set for this page. Then there's this baseline grid. So the baseline grid ends, of course, somewhere. So in the end, what I usually do is that I adjust my bottom margin in such a way that it actually fits my grid. So I can go to my margins and columns. It's now set to 20. So if I look, there's this point that I'm going to say, you see 19, I still see a line, 20, it's gone. You can be more specific. You could also say, well, if it's visible at 19.8, yeah, almost. Or maybe 19.7. Yeah, there it starts. So let's say, to be more exact, my margin starts at 19.8. So I adjust the margin so that I know that this last baseline grid actually kind of hits my bottom margin. So that is kind of like base one. So you can make it smaller, bigger. Anyway, what I like to see is that the decision you make in your baseline grid kind of like plays together with the placement of your margin, so that they kind of are nicely organized. Then we go into the paragraph styles. So basically what I usually do is that, you start with the body text, because that's kind of the core of most of the text that you will be processing. I already know that the leading I've set in my baseline grid is 12, and I thought of having something around 9, so okay, I've made a typeface, and in my basic character formats, I've set this to 9 and 12. Now I'm going to quickly, because that's a hard one, I'm going to try in between to change this. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. So in this view, I've set it to a Claridon, made it 9 by 12, and so I know that if I look at my indents and spacing, it says align to grid, all lines. So it will always follow my baseline grid. One of the key differences that we can instantly spot and are quite often misused or misinterpreted is the use of paragraph styles versus character styles. So a paragraph style sets a style to the entire paragraph. So from the start of a sentence all the way up till there is a return. And if you turn on in type your hidden characters, you can see them by this icon here. So you don't need to select your whole text to style it. I can just instantly say, this or this. So it applies this all the way until that end of paragraph style. A character style is only applied to do stuff and apply a style inside a paragraph on a character level. So you could say, I'm gonna put one word in italic, or and I quite often still see in the 4th year documents or with the thesis design, people selecting whole parts of text and then applying a character style to it. No, not good. Okay, so paragraph styles for whole sentences, character styles is for the detailing inside a paragraph. And you can go extreme there. So basically, I now have my text set on a grid, and one of the reasons why it doesn't make up for making a really small baseline grid is that you don't control whether the text on another page might be slightly set to one of the other baseline grids. Because if I have a leading or type that is 9 by 12, but I have a baseline grid of 3, how can I tell that it didn't kind of shift one single little line? which maybe might not be so dramatic, but if you would like to print your book on a beautiful semi-transparent thin paper, it will be very painful to see that then all of a sudden all your lines in typography will mesh through each other. So is one of the things of like try to be exact on this point. But of course we don't only have a body text, we also want to use a lot of other styles. And I think that's one of the things that what you can do in this assignment, which actually will benefit and help you for a long time, is that if you create a InDesign document where you've done this and you set up these master pages and the paragraph styles and the character styles, they actually apply to every project you do. Because every book more or less has paragraph styles of a body text, an intro, a title, a subheader, footnotes, captions, endnotes, credits, etc. You can be as much as you want. But more or less all of them have them. So if you have a default document with a set of baseline grid, set up master pages, and a predetermined set of paragraph styles, every time you start a new drafting procedure of a new assignment or a new project, you could just open that up and you only need to tweak the parameters of your paragraph styles. And that saves you already like, what, 4 hours of work before you get to the point of like being freely designing. The other thing that helps is that I already just kind of showed and explained that in this body text, I also have, let's say, this based on function. So I'm going to set this for the record now off. So body text is 1. So if I have, let's say, another paragraph style, in this case my intro text, it will say it is based on body text. So everything, just like the pages, it changed back all the way up to this very first body text. And an easy fix also sometimes to do is to, let's say, is to, you can, for instance, take a piece of text. I'm going to just do this easy. If I have if I would just kind of adjust this and say I'm going to make a slightly bigger one, in my paragraph styles, it would give me a little sign that says, hey, there's a little plus here. That means that my style has been altered. But if I like this change, I can either do two things. I can either say redefine style, so that it changes everything to the new setting that I made, or I can also just create a new paragraph style, and then it automatically takes, based on body chain text, but takes those changes into account for a new paragraph style. So in this case I have an intro, I have a body text, and here I have a footnote style. Just, it's more used as a caption, but anyway. But of course I'm going to make changes in terms of size. So let's say my body text is, let's say, my mediocre DJ middle of the road typeface, and then I'm going to go bigger for intros and headlines and smaller for captions, footnotes, credits. But I want to respect and have the same system and optically the same leading as my body text. If I would simply just say, hey, I'm going to put this paragraph and I'm going to set it to intro, that looks crap, because then all of a sudden the leading is bigger than 12, so it's going to jump one extra baseline and I get a different leading, which you'll of course know, and it's annoying. That's not what you want. So how do we get to a system that we have more control over these sizes, but respect the original baseline system so that we have things neatly organized? And this is where the last set comes in, and these are the object styles. So in this case, it's the same as if I would select a text box and you could go to your text frame options. What you can also do is that the object style is something that probably most of you don't really use that much, or maybe not even ever used. It's exactly the same thing. It only applies to every type of graphic object in your InDesign file. So if you draw shapes, lines, text boxes, image frames, anything that you reuse on a lot of different levels, you can make a style sheet for this. So that, for instance, if I have this line here, I can make it and make a new one. I can make an object style that says line. So that means that if I would duplicate that and I have them on all my pages, and also there at the end of the book, I think, no, this line is too thick. Damn, I have to now redo and go to every page and separately select and then change the line. You know what? Fuck it. I'm not going to do it. I have a presentation in the Schouw tomorrow. I'm not going to change this. But if this would have been an object style, you don't even need to do anything. You just open the object style, and then I'm going to switch back here. Where are you? Object style options. Yes. Okay. So that I can just set the parameters here and go, for instance, to where are you? My stroke, and say, oh, I'm going to make it 1 point, and then it just updates this everywhere in the book. So you could say, let's say you want to have an image frame, but I want to have it with corner options. I want to have it like slightly nicely detailed, rounded corners of 2 millimeters. You just make one, create a new one, round corners, corners. That's also a good one. So later on I can use them everywhere throughout my book, and I can always tweak and always go back and say, you know what, I think that in this stroke or in these corner options, I'm gonna make it 5 millimeters. So, boom. And it applies to a lot of different things. You can make it as dramatic of, give it all kinds of crazy shady things. So sometimes it's even nice to, even if you have a rough idea, you can just drag and draw some first elements that you might find useful, because once you just kind of selected and gave it a name, you can always alter it later on. Yeah? Okay. So, why do I start and make this jump from typography to object styles? Is that these object styles also have another unique feature, and is that, for instance, here I made one for my intro text. And so what I did here is that I created inside the text frame and gave it a custom baseline grid. So it has its own little baseline grid only inside of that text frame. And by doing so, I can make a size that I would feel fit for what I have in mind for my design, and to make sure that it always matches up with all the other grid systems. So in this case, my intro has a type size of 12 by 15. So I know that the leading, this is 15, so apparently there's something, the relationship between my baseline grid being 9, and then for the intro I need to have 15. So why 15? Well, first of all, in my drafts I apparently had this very lucid and amazing idea to make it 12 points. So my leading should be bigger than 12. So in this case, what you see if I zoom into the grids is this is the baseline grid of 9, and so it kind of drifts away until every 4 lines come back to every 5 lines of the original baseline grid. So you have a subsystem where every time it comes back after 5 lines. So that would mean that if I have small text or big text kind of running next to each other, or in the case of this translucent paper design, you would feel that there's a harmony between these structures. And the same for footnotes, where I made a smaller one where every other line it returns exact. So how do we do this? Is that if we open up this object style, and I go to this text frame baseline options, and hey, voila, there's an option here, says baseline grid, use custom baseline grid. In this case I said start at 0 millimeters relative to the top of the frame, so start calculating from the top of your frame, and the increment is 15 points. So how did I get to, how did I get to this 15 points? When I tried to work with this after I graduated, first of all, I have to admit, like, I skipped every typography class at art school because it was so boring. So I know that I'm also kind of feeding you with, let's say, the most boring stuff here now in the department, but I try to do it in such a way that if you understand the small principles and do it once, you can really benefit and save so much time that it becomes almost fun, and it becomes really the nerdy part of our profession. That's also what I like. So I had to find a way to appreciate and to kind of start to love this a bit. And so I don't like calculations, but I found this trick that someone showed me once, is in order to get to this comparison between, let's say, my basic baseline grid and where I want to go to, there's a simple trick of, let's say, I'm going to start that it is 9, because that's my baseline grid. And then I use a simple shortcut keys for calculations inside a tab, which I don't know if you guys know that or use it. If you use Shift 8, this little star, it multiplies. And if you use the slash, it will divide. So I can say, you know what, I'm going to divide this by 3. And you see in the background, then it turned it into a 3-point baseline grid. But I can also then say multiply by 5, and it's 15. And why this? Because I need to come up with a digit bigger than 12. And actually, almost, if you start experimenting with this, you cannot really do things wrong, because whatever you do, it will always come to a digit that is dividable through the start of your baseline grid. So it is, let's say, you can say, well, divide by 3 times 4. Divide by 4 times 3. So you get different numbers, and whether you need to have a smaller number in the case of footnotes or bigger in the case of titles or intros, you will find a number that comes close to your type size, that's slightly bigger than your type size, and then it works. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yes. Okay, so basically, what we now have is that we have, let's say, 2 style sheets that will always work together. So if I would kind of drag this thing very small, which doesn't make sense, and I drag this one just temporarily here, there's always a point where they meet. But what is also important is that optically you would like to, let's say, have a consistency between the optical leading between your lines, how they are on your body text and on your introduction text. Now I already tweaked this a little bit this morning for class 3B, but basically there's 2 ways. If you think about leading, you can of course say, oh, you know what, I want to have it more condensed, so I want to adjust the leading. That would be the normal way of doing things. But hey, I just made the system that works with my baseline grid. Another way of dealing with the leading is actually changing the type size. You would think, huh? Because these lines are locked to this baseline grid. So if I would now go to my paragraph styles, go to intro, and here I'm going to say paragraph styles. So in this case, I can also tweak my leading by just changing the size of my font. So if I make my intro smaller, optically I get more space between the lines, so I'm actually adjusting also the leading. So it's almost, it feels like a counterproductive or like an opposite way of working, of making the leading bigger, but you can do this by making your type size smaller, or vice versa. So you can really tweak and say, and what I also explained this morning to the other class, one way of doing this, and the trick that I often use, is that I just pinch and look through my eyelashes, so that these 2 blocks of text, they become like a blurry gray box. If your blurry gray box is kind of a consistent blurry gray box, it is actually perfect for reading. It makes it less tiring for your reader to go through the text. If you see more gray lines, usually it's the case that your leading is too big, so you need to compress it a little bit. Or when it gets too dense or too black, it's usually too narrow. So it's kind of like something that Evert Bloemsma taught me when I was in art school, and I always thought like, that's actually a simple, good trick, because then you can also compare the kind of grayscales between the 2 squares to see if you need to adjust a little bit and think, yeah, maybe it needs to be 12.2, because no one says that you cannot use decimals in type sizes. You know? So it could also be that you take even tiny, like 0.2, 0.3, to adjust the leading in order to get the same result that you have optically, kind of the same leading in your intro text and in your body text. And the same counts for this. So you could actually say, you know, it feels a bit more, is it a bit more open? Maybe it is. Maybe I can just change this and then say it's going to be 6. So then it's slightly more, fills it up a little bit. Besides this kind of grayness, one other aspect that I find important when dealing with text is, and also that corresponds a bit to the margins, is more of a side note, is keep in mind a little bit when you're dealing with texts that are like longer texts people need to kind of somehow pleasantly read, to keep it around 8 to 12 words a line. If it's like 16, 17, your sentences become too long and your eyes get tired because every time you have to search where you ended and what was the next line. Whereas if you have very small and compact columns, it's only often useful for, let's say, like in newspapers, where you have like small compact articles, short paragraphs that like are easy to digest. But you're not going to read an essay in like these columns, you know, that doesn't make sense. So that's why also, for instance, you already see that I try to make a difference between using 4 columns here for my body text and perhaps maybe 5 for the intro because it's bigger. So optically I still have a kind of a nice coherent amount of words per line. And that's why sometimes it's also beneficial for nice big books by Irma Boom that are like gigantically big, that they have a body text of 16 points because the book is already this big, so you want to have the same kind of lines or words per line. So although, yeah, I don't like to say that these are rules, these are actually kind of tools that I can provide that makes it just easier to read and digest larger chunks of text. So I have a object style for my intro, and I've made a a object style for my footnote. So all these things that are now chained up together, what is the big benefit of this? Is that if I have like a layout, I have some pages, I have column structures, I have some paragraph styles, I have some character styles. What you can do is that even if you would just take the content and just click on like, okay, this is body, this is a title, this is a subheader, this is a footer, you just kind of actually just format them that they get this connection to that style. Because they're linked, it's very interesting for drafting, is that I can just open the body text, which is the number 1 in my chain, and go to the basic character formats. I'm going to quickly put this back on. Yeah, okay. So if I have set this to Clarendon, but I can just use my arrow keys up and down through my font list, and then it changes my entire book. So whether it is like the footnotes or anything, I can just kind of go through and think, oh, what would be nice for this project? So can you imagine, if you have this document and you start drafting and thinking about, oh shit, I have to deliver something for tomorrow for Hendrik Jan. What should I do? Oh no, he's not teaching. Someone else. You know, the fact is that you can just make 5 versions of your books in 10 minutes. That's the real power of this. And once you have this document made once, you can reuse it for every project. So often I see this also in the Schouw, you know, then there's like design research or open lab projects, and then there's a lot of time invested and put into the research and collecting material and stuff like that. But then to put it somewhere to present it, then it is like, well, what happened? I think you also are following a typography course, but somehow why don't these rules all of a sudden apply when you're doing a design research project or when you need to create another type of booklet? Well, yeah. And it is often the fact that you dismiss this because you think, oh, it's going to be so labor intense to make a whole book out of this just in 2 days, and I also have to stand in line at Walter, and it's not going to work. If you have this, you can do some quite rapid prototyping. And what I sometimes do with these books, I also, for instance, have books that I think, oh, I want to combine a sans serif with a serif. And I don't know yet how or what. So what I can do is that I just create one paragraph style. It's called sans serif. One is called serif. And then I duplicate my whole set of body text, intro, I duplicate it. And then one I chain up to the sans serif and one to the serif. And then I can just kind of combine circular with Times, Arial with Bodoni. And I can just see the whole book change in front of my eyes to see like, oh, that's a nice combination. Oh, that's nice. And that's extremely powerful because usually you don't get this kind of detailing of like, how do footnotes in a serif work with a big capital, like massive, dark, grotesque or something. So that hopefully can help you guys out to kind of like make quicker decisions, but also see that even the choice of typeface could maybe add 80 pages to your project, and then you're going to think, yeah, sorry, I had to change it because I don't have the budget. I cannot spend 200 euros on this printout of this book. And it's, yeah, well, I could have almost told you that in week 2, when you presented your first drafts, that this is going to be a lot of pages, you know. And here, if you put your content in, it applies this on your entire book, so you instantly see that you're going to save or add a lot of extra pages. So there's also kind of awareness, but also kind of an economical implication of every design decision that you make. Then, so we have pages, grids, style sheets of objects, paragraphs, characters. That's already a lot. Then there's a couple of small nifty things that I want to show you that also can help you a lot when organizing content. One of them is the use of anchor links. And what is interesting about this is that if you just draw, let's say, an object, and this is going to be, let's say, an image. Who of you ever questioned, like, what is this little blue thing here? Yeah. Well, it is actually, like, I also looked at it for quite some years that I thought, like, I don't know, yeah, okay. Nowadays, it does give you a hover at a certain point. It's like, oh, I can do something here. And the great thing is that you can just click and drag and then appoint this to a location, to a text. So I can say, you know what, this belongs to this on this level, and then it shows me this thread. So I can say, oh, you know what, it actually applies to this rule, and I want it to follow that line. And the great thing is, once you set that up, that if you move stuff around, it just follows exactly that position, which I think most of you have the experience of making a design, then changing or making up your decision to do something else, and then having the same question again, like, oh shit, now I have to kind of reposition all the images on 60 pages. And then like after a couple of times, then there's another little thing that comes up and you're already like, should I do this? Because I'm having to do this again. In this case, once you put it all in and you say, okay, this belongs to this belongs to that belongs to this, it doesn't matter, you know, it is even like on type. So if I just make edits or break, everything kind of like it just joins together. And that makes your life really a lot easier, and I can reposition this thing, and then it still depends and knows, it takes that position. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, it's a good one to use in under View Extras. It's called Show Text Threads. Yeah. It's the same that if a text box runs with content from one into the other, then it also shows that the content from this text box will flow into this text box. So, and it doesn't matter what it is, you know, so I also put this one there, a text box there, this text box there, so you can have all kinds of material and it will always follow, let's say, the placement of the content, which is, it's really convenient about this. Any questions about this so far? No? Okay, then two more things that I want to show you guys. And the first one is called which is actually related, it's more of a variable. So what I did here is that, let's say I'm now working still in my master pages, but okay, I'm going to this page here. And so I have a title, intro, I have some text, and it goes to a second page, and a third page, exactly, So what I want is that most of the publications you probably came across is that we use running headers. So in this case, I'm going to say, hey, well, this is chapter 1, welcome 3A, it's by a specific author, you could have the name of the book, so it's this kind of stuff that populates the margins of your book. And they're very handy because often they are also almost like the infrastructure, or almost like the architecture, that you see how specific columns are set so that they can be anchored. So it's nice. I can also say, oh, I'm going to put something and align that with a specific part of my running header. But the annoying thing is, if you have a book with quite a lot of chapters, then either you would need to make a master page for every chapter and then put the chapter name in the top and the author in the top. And then if things change, then you have to redo that. Or things get loose and then you have to really think about, oh, wait, I have to check all the headers before printing it. But there's a way of kind of going about this, and these are called text variables. So under type, you have text variables that you can define. And let's bring that in as well. So in this case, you can make a new one. I already made one. It's called chapter. You can just give it any name you want. Maybe good to kind of like header test. So in this case, there's a couple of options that you can check. So you can have an automated chapter number, a creation date, file name. I don't know why you would want to have a file name there, but it could be. So it automatically inputs data in your InDesign file. In this case, I chose a running header based on a paragraph style. So what this system actually basically does is that I made a paragraph style for my title. And so the first on page, the first time it sees that you use this paragraph style, it will take the content of that piece of text that you set in this paragraph style and put that in the running header automatically. And you can have an options of like text before. So here it says already chapter and a dash before the name, change case, etc. So okay. And you can also instantly or insert it if you select it. But you can also do it separately by you can just select and go under type, insert variable. Where did I now put it? Oh no, I didn't, of course, save it. So it's just chapter. Oh, header test. I did save it. Header test. Chapter, header test. And I made one for author. And so author is related to the paragraph style author that I made. Doesn't matter how you name them. So in this case, here I have a title, paragraph style title. And okay. So what it does is it takes this content, welcome 3A, and then if I go to the next page, it says chapter, welcome 3A. So if I would go back and say, Arnhem, I'm feeling so creative today. It will just change it instantly into Arnhem. And the same for Remco, you can Babo. So then it becomes Babo. And the crazy thing is that's also interesting to experiment with this because you can do this with paragraph styles, but you can also do this on the level of character styles. So you could potentially like use it kind of as a keyword that you highlight words in your text with a specific character style, and then it extracts those words, and then you can put them on the side or like having it as a tab or a navigational structure if you want. So it's actually nice. And so if I would change things, it will also follow it always. So I can say, oh yeah, next chapter, or howdy. And then howdy. And it updates. So it's extremely powerful because once you start making a bigger book and you think, oh, I'm gonna need some extra pages here or just divide some stuff, then all of a sudden you don't need to think about this. It kind of like updates itself. It's a very convenient tool. And another small little thing that's always funny to explain because I never figured out why InDesign didn't fix this is that I'm gonna just quickly do this. So in this example, let's say I have I have my page numbers here in the bottom. But sometimes I like this in certain books, but maybe you have a layout that sometimes you would wonder, hey, I would like to have both numbers on the same page where one page refers back to the previous page. So 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., etc. And there is a function in InDesign that you could say in this text box, I can say insert special character markers previous page number. So I put it in, and I'm gonna now put it here. Awesome. So if I just go to the page, it shows 3.3. It shows the current page number. So it doesn't work. And no one knows why they didn't make it work. And there's one solution to it, which is even more crazy because it really doesn't make sense, and I'll show it to you. So if you ever think about, hey, I would like to have 2 page numbers on the same page, this is like really, you can really impress people on a party with a conversation like this, you know. Then you can go and create a link between the 2 pages. So actually, basically what you need to do is that you create a text box on one side of the page, and I'm going to duplicate, I'm going to make another text box, but I'm going to put that on the other page, and then I'm going to link them together. And the crazy thing is, if you do this and then you place this underneath the text box that has the page number, then it works. But yeah, just 2 empty boxes that somehow the system needs to know, oh, this page is then the previous page to this page. I don't know what they made up, how, why, or they maybe make these kind of like Easter egg things to see, let's see if they find the solution, you know? How good is the Adobe community to solve this little nasty riddle? Because I did like 2 books before that I did all the page numbering in the end by hand because I couldn't find this, and I got so mad. And then at one point on a forum I found someone saying, oh, you can draw an empty text box, and then this thread exploded of people just saying, why? We don't know, but it works. So ever since I also did 3 books with this, and it saves me a lot of hassle. Any questions about what we discussed so far?
How did you change it from all at once again?
Yeah, okay. I will go back to this. So basically, it has to do with being very systematic in creating, let's say, a chain of pairs where I made a paragraph style body text. So this body text is based on itself. It is not set to anything else. It's the first one. And basically, so if I look at, for instance, my intro text, it is set based on body text. So all these style sheets that I used, if I look at subtitle, which I haven't, oh yeah, there's a subtitle here, and there's a footnote here, and the footnote is also based on body text. Yeah? Where is this? Yes. Let's put you in. So, since they are all lined up together, and we already determined that if you don't change anything, it will remain the same. So in my footnote, I only changed the size and the leading, In the intro, I made it bigger. In the footnote, I made it smaller. But I didn't touch anything about the font. So the font information it takes from this very first one, which is the body text. So if I now say, well, then if I go to body text and I would change the font here, it changes the font in all the other paragraph styles. So I can just change and say, let's turn this into a so now in this case, you see that like the intro, the body, my subtitle, my footnotes, everything changed accordingly to this. Even my page number and headers and everything. And so I now just picked one from my window here, my selection tool, but yeah, you can. Which is also interesting, and I'm gonna show this to you next week when we go deeper in these paragraph styles, when we start to incorporate grep styles, and then you can even tweak and customize things even more to the max. But in this case, it's like for me always kind of a pleasant, kind of like a quick tool to adjust layouts and to help me think about like what is maybe the first look and feel of a book. Like where do I kind of start from? It's kind of a basic toolkit set. So if you spend this upcoming week just by making a default InDesign file with the style sheets, object styles, stuff that you actually just make an analysis of what a archetype book would need and try to bring those in, then you can save this shit for life. And every time you need to make something new, you just take that thing out and instead, I'm going to change the font, going to change this, going to rename that, just move this a bit around, okay, put the margin slightly different. Hey, already have a design. Yeah? Okay. And the reason why I'm also saying this is that I think that it's at the core of what comes next. So when we think of web design, and I'm not asking you to become a coder or program the damn thing, but you need to understand that this decision you make on type size or the way a title works or how a little text contribution in a post works, that will look the same on every page. So if you say the body has these characteristics, it is 15 pixels, 18 pixels line height, the line spacing is -2, all these little details you can set in the CSS of a web page. Because once this needs to be translated to a mobile, the developer will also say, hey, if this page is loaded in on a mobile, it will be 0.2 of the size that is being given there. So they're all connected to, you make a statement of how this font looks here, and then you describe if the screen is smaller than this amount of pixels, then scale those parameters by half or by a third. So this whole line of thinking that the way you construct kind of like do this becomes only more exact when you need to think about web interfaces or video screens. Yeah? Yeah, I think I covered almost the exact same stuff a bit as this morning. Hopefully the same. for me it's also a bit of a test to do this, being like recording this and talking to you, so no clue how it works and how the recordings, if they make sense. I will just try to put them somewhere online and then provide you with a link so that you can always look back to or listen to kind of, oh yeah, what was it about variables? What is it about these object styles? What is it about these paragraph styles? But I think this is in a nutshell that if you understand these core principles, it will only get easier actually. And I think it will save you a lot of time, hopefully. Yeah. So thanks for today, guys. I think I'm gonna mail both classes to be a bit more concrete what I expect for you to bring for next week. I'm not planning to give you a lot of, let's say, homework. So it's more like this, like a small exercise. Make one document with paragraph and style sheets. And for the week with you, when we bring in UX design and Adobe XD, so that you just know the foundations and how to work with them before we actually start using them. Yeah? Okay. That's